All right, well, let's get started. Thank you again for joining us this morning. My name is Steven Rivas. I'm the product manager for Win911 here at SmartSights. And today we're going to be talking about our voice notifier within Win911. So just a heads up, I did put this together with the assumption that you are familiar with Win911. But if you're not, uh, I hope you don't get lost on this, but I think you'll be okay. Oops, let me get rid of that. All right, so Win911, what is Win911? I think, again, I am operating on the assumption that you're familiar with Win911. You know that it's an alarm notification system for SCADA and industrial automation. We connect to various different SCADA systems, and we run that through our escalation engine and make those alarms available to you through various methods like our mobile app, text messaging, email, and what we're going to talk about today is our voice module. And of course, my start menu is on that screen. I just wanted to, can you guys hear me okay? Wasn't able to check sound earlier today. Can you just put something in the chat, make sure? All right, there we go. Thank you. Sorry, I should have checked that earlier. So yeah, so we're talking about the voice module and how it works today. So what is the voice module? Or let me go through a call example real quick, just so you know exactly what we're talking about. So we've got the we've got alarms in our system, and we want to send them to somebody in the field that can do something about it. I just wanted to run you through an example of what I'm even talking about. So what Win911 will do is it will call you. You have an intro or a greeting message. It's going to say something like, "Hey, Steven, this is Win911. You can control this. You can put in whatever you want there. Please enter your authorization code." You put your code in. It's going to tell you how many alarms have been escalated to you, and then you can either just listen to them or acknowledge them and then hang up the phone, and it will acknowledge that alarm and send it back to your SCADA system if you're using one of our direct connects, or if it's OPC, it acts it back into Win911. So that's the basis of what the voice notifier does. It's going to call you on the phone, verbalize the message, and allow you to acknowledge it directly from the phone. So how is it doing that though? So the voice notifier it is a soft phone. So if you don't know what a soft phone is, it's just like what it sounds like. It's a phone that runs on your computer, it's software-based phone, and it connects to um, some kind of VoIP server. You don't need hardware for this, except for one case that we'll talk about in just a moment. But what it allows you to do is make multiple calls at one time. So if you have a big call out list and you're trying to call multiple people and blast out messages to people, you can do up to 8 simultaneous phone calls. Granted, most people don't do that, but it is an option. So you can call multiple people. It uses a SIP, which is Session Initiated Protocol, which most every VoIP server supports. And most of those server situations look something like this. I apologize for my very basic diagram. I'm not the greatest graphic artist on the planet, but if you have something like a Cisco system in which on our on-prem customers that use VoIP, or most of them are using Cisco, um, Win911 it's running on a server, and it needs to connect to that IPPBX that's running in a server closet somewhere, registers with that, and then it's able to make phone calls through that PBX. So that's one way that it can connect to a VoIP server that's an on-prem server. Again, a lot of our customers use Cisco for that. And then if you don't have an on-prem uh, PBX, then, or VoIP server, if you want to call it that, then there are a bunch of cloud providers that are available. Our favorite one that we like to work with is SIP.us in North America. They're easy to work with. It works all the time. And there's also Twilio's available, which is a well-known communications company. That setup is a little more complicated to get going, but SIP.us, it's put in a credit card, sign up, get a phone number, and you're ready to go. Um, and that's why we like it so much. And we do a lot of our testing with SIP.us as well, for a cloud-based PBX system. All right, so that's great. But what if you have a landline? A lot of our customers are coming from it's an upgrade system, and they used to have something called Tappy, which was a USB modem that connected directly to their computer, and they still have a landline and they want to use it, but VoIP doesn't connect directly to a landline. So you need this middleman device, and we've been supporting this GrandStream VoIP PBX for a long time. This is actually a newer model of the PBX we used to support. What this does is you connect this to your network, and Win91 will register through SIP over the network to it, and then that device has phone lines plugged into it. And so Win91 is making a VoIP call from the software, but then it actually goes out through an analog line through this GrandStream device. Like I said, we've been selling them for a while, and they're very reliable. We like them a lot, and we'll continue to support them for a while. It's just another basic diagram. So instead of going, so what Win91 would go straight to this GrandStream device, and I don't have it on the diagram, but that GrandStream device would be connected to a VoIP. I'm sorry, a landline, and then all the calls would go through that landline. Now you can, when you go this route, you can only make as many phone calls simultaneously as you have phone lines. So if you have one phone line, then you can only make one phone call at a time, whether it's inbound or outbound. You'll be limited by that. This particular device, this model number supports one phone line. There are other GrandStream devices that support multiple phone lines, but typically this single phone line model fits most of our customers' needs. But if you do need that, then please contact us and we can help you out and figure out what you need to do to support multiple phone lines. So how do you set voice up? Well, there's three main components to it. There's the voice gateway. This is where in Win911 you're going to put all the server settings for what you're going to connect to, whether it's SIP, whether it's your Cisco system, or whether it's a GrandStream device. You're going to have to put in some kind of settings into Win911 so it knows how to communicate with that. Second part is the voice contacts. This is who you're going to notify, what are their schedules, that kind of thing. And then the last thing is you have to put, it's not really part of the voice setup, but if you want to contact these people, then you have to put them into a call out list so it knows to call them. So rather than just keep going through slides, I wanted to just do a live demo and show you that. In this case, I wanted to show you setting it up with SIP.us. And I apologize, my virtual machine's been going kind of slow today. I'm not sure what's up with that. And just also in the while we're transitioning to another screen here, if you have any questions during the webinar, just there's a question section of GoToWebinar where you can type them in. So if you have questions throughout it, just put it in there, and at the end, we'll go ahead and answer some of those questions. All right. We should be looking at Win91 Workspace now. This is where you configure most of Win91. Right now we are in the gateways section of Win91. This is where you configure everything you want to connect to, whether it's here Gmail. If I was going to connect to an email server, I have that set up for Gmail. I've got Win91 mobile set up, which I was using for a Rockwell demo. That's why it's called Rockwell demo. And then we're setting up right now the voice gateway, and we're going to put in some SIP.us settings. So the first thing you'll notice is there is a name field. This is totally up to you. There's really no rhyme or reason for a name to put in here. You can only have one gateway at the moment. That may change in the future, and then having a unique name for that will make sense. And then we've got a few options here, and I'll talk about these options a little bit more after the demo. But one, it controls how you can acknowledge alarms while you're on the phone, and another one enables and disables speech recognition. I'm not going to demo that here because it's pretty difficult to do that over a webinar. I'll just talk about it later. And then let's go through, I'm going to go through the actual setup of the gateway first, and then I'll come back to this hot backup stuff here. All right, so for the voice hardware, that's where we're going to focus now. you've got three different options here. If you're using GrandStream, we have, I've already modified some of this so the addresses are a little wonky. But for the GrandStream device, we've pre-programmed some settings to go along with the programming guide that we release on our knowledge base. So if you have a device that you've purchased from us, then it should be pretty much ready to go out of the box other than setting up an IP address for it. Then you would put in whatever that IP address is, and then you would choose what network adapter you want to go out on. So that would be the IP address of this machine. And then you could pretty much connect to that server. We don't have a GrandStream device set up today, so we're not going to do that. Then you've got SIP.us. So I've told you that SIP.us is something we test with a lot, and because of that, we removed some of the settings to make it a little bit easier. If you are using SIP.us, where you just have to put in some of the details that they give you, like you can assume what the gateway address is going to be and the port numbers and all that kind of stuff, because those don't ever change. And so we just set those static to just take some of the fields away. And then the last one is SIP/VoIP. This is what this gives you all the details of everything that you can change, and we'll just go ahead and set it up this way, I suppose. So you've got quite a few fields here to fill in, and they're going to change on different depending on which VoIP server you're using. Again, I'm going to use SIP.us, so I know what some of these settings are already, and just because I've already gone to SIP.us, I've signed up for an account, I've got my ID numbers and passwords and whatnot. So we have a SIP guide for that too, that you can, a SIP.us guide you can follow to get those details so you know what you're putting in here. So user ID is going to be something they call register trunk number. So this is a unique number. This is not a phone number. This is just an ID, an account ID in a way. You can put in a display name, but I mean, it's for caller ID, but it almost never works for any of the VoIP servers. It just doesn't pass through for whatever reason. So you could put something like maybe like alarm system, but the chances of it passing through to your phone are pretty slim. It's usually just going to show the phone number that is calling you. Then you have this idea of called registration required. So in some VoIP servers, you have to log on to the server, and for that, you need that registration ID and a password. For SIP, the registration ID is the same thing, and the password is a different ID or different field. Paste that in there. And a lot of times on a Cisco system, I see people not enabling this. The IT admins don't require it, and you can just uncheck it. If you uncheck it, it just goes away, and then you don't have to put those details in. But we'll leave it there. And then we get to the channels. How the channels work. A channel is like, think of it like a phone line. So you can have an inbound channel or an outbound channel. So inbound means you can call into the system. Outbound means you can call out. And bidirectional means you can reserve that one channel for either one. You can either call in on it or you can call out on it. So if you don't want anyone calling in, then you could set bidirectional to 0 and you would set your outbound to 1. So now you can make an outbound call, one call at a time. That's what this means. If I had multiple phone lines available, I told you you can go up to 8 channels. Then you can make up to 8 phone calls at a time, assuming your VoIP server supports it. In some cases, you're not going to be able to make 8 phone calls at a time. Usually people set that, usually it's set to 1, but max I usually see is set to 2. And then you can make 2 phone calls simultaneously. So that's what these channels are for. So if you want to make inbound, if you want to reserve one channel for inbound or outbound, you can do that. If you want to set them to either inbound or outbound, so a reason you would want to set one channel to outbound and one channel to inbound is that you always have a channel open for someone to call in and check to see what alarms are in the system at that particular moment. If you only had one channel and it was bidirectional, and you're on a call and you call out and you call into the system, you're gonna get a busy signal, and then you're gonna have to keep calling back until it's free. But if you had a reserved inbound channel, then you wouldn't have to do that. For this, I'll just set it to 1 bidirectional. Then there is an answer delay. So what the answer delay is for inbound channels is if you're sharing, this is more for the GrandStream device, or if you're in a hot backup situation. If you want to have window and get the phone call and then wait some amount of time before it picks up the line, then you can set that here. But again, it's more for a landline using through GrandStream. If you're sharing that line with other devices like a fax machine or something, you can set answer delays here for that kind of stuff. Then you need the server address. For SIP, that's gw1.sip.us. For a Cisco system, that'd be an IP address probably. It just depends on what you're connecting to. And then depending on, I don't need a proxy address for this. I'm just going to go directly to the server. But if you required one, then you would set that here. Now we're getting into all the port settings. These are predefined for SIP.us, and 5060 is a default SIP port for almost every VoIP server out there, so it's usually not going to change. And if it does, it's probably going to be 5061. And then you've got your real-time media. What is it? Real-time. Can't remember what it is. Real-time. Uh, it's a media port protocol. It's for what the audio travels over the port range for that. I was driving me nuts. I can't remember the acronym for that. But you usually have a set number of ports for that. And for SIP.us, this is the range that we use. It could be something else if you're using a Cisco server, or it depends on the IT admin and what they set the default to. Oh, I skipped over NAT type. NAT, if you're natted, then you have to come in here. Well, usually auto detect will take care of it. And basically that means you're trying to connect to something and you can't get the connection back because you're natted and your network or your router doesn't know where to send that. Well, you can do auto detect, and the toolkit we're using will take care of it. You can do manual, and what you would normally put here is like the IP address of your router. That way the messages that go out, they get encoded and they know where to come back to. Um, and then there's other options if you're using a stun server, or if you're using a turn server, which would be specific to your IT admin would probably tell you that. Then you can set those up, and then you have to set up the server username, password, which starts to get into more advanced stuff. Auto detect will work almost every time. And then you've got the network adapter. A lot of SCADA systems where Win91 is connected to have multiple network cards, and you have to specify which network card you want to make the connections through. So if you're looking at the control network on one network card and you're looking at the enterprise network on another, well, you're going to want to make sure you set this thing to use that enterprise network, because that's probably what's going to allow you to connect to your Cisco system or to zip.us. In this case, I only have one. Obviously, the default's the home address, and then this is the address I'm using with VMware. And you would choose that address. So now it knows which device to use. So that's the network adapter. So you're telling it which one to use. And then you've got transport type, which is almost always UDP, but there are other options. I'm not really going to get into that. And then the last thing is a dialing prefix that I'll talk about, or SR. This is for secure RTP mode. So so it's just it's instead of unencrypt, I think it's just unencrypt. This is encrypted RTP, and you can choose whether you want to force the soft phone to use it, or just tell the server you prefer to use it and leave it up to the server to determine which one you're going to use. Then there's the dialing prefix. The dialing prefix is what if you wanted to, let's say you had to dial a 9 every time you want to get out, you could put that here, and then every entry in your directory, you wouldn't have to type the 9 in. We've had some problems with it depending on different servers, so I think if you do have to use a dialing prefix, I'd probably just put it in the directory and do it that way. It's less problematic. Then we've got the audio settings. So the way this thing works is it's using text-to-speech to verbalize messages. And if you want to use text-to-speech, you have to choose which engine you want to use. and these are the default engines that are built into what is this, Server 2222? It'll vary on different servers you have. We still have our premium voices too that are available, and Microsoft also has other voices that are available that you can choose from. And then there are just these default settings. I'm not going to get into them, but I did mention that there's a greeting message. If you wanted to put something else, like this is the wastewater treatment plant or something like that, you could put that in there so the operator knows what the phone call is, what that phone call is about when it first calls them. And there's a greeting delay, and you can choose different codecs for the audio. And if you auto select it, it negotiates with the server which codec to use, so you don't really have to think about it. Don't have to do anything there. So that's all the settings in. I know this is a lot, and that's why we've made them shorter for different ones. So if you choose SIP.us, it's a little bit shorter, and if it's GrandStream, it's a lot shorter. So I know it's a lot of settings, so that's why we've done that. And I haven't. Oh, it reset my thing here. Let me copy that in because I switched tabs. Well, it won't let me save. Registration ID. And just to be sure I got the password right, save. All right, and now we can do a test if my thing will cooperate here. Like I said, I'm having problems with this system. So if I put in a phone number, it will call me and make sure everything works. So it's going to queue up that call, and it's going to make the call. And I'm having a network problem here, so there won't be audio on my call. I'm using a router that uses something called SIP.ALG, and it's reconfiguring the packet so the audio is not working. So it calls me, I can answer, and then if my network was working correctly, it would say you've configured everything correctly, and then you can start making phone calls with it. So that's how you set up a server. Now I'll come back to the top here and talk about a few other options here. So the hot backup relation. So if you use Win91 with a hot backup system, and we have recently released a failover module, if you have two Win91 systems and you're using a GrandStream device, or you're sharing a phone line, or even if you just, it doesn't really matter if you're doing that anyway, you only want one of those systems to answer when you call in, because you want you want whatever system is the active system at the moment to answer the phone, so you can tell when not the server, is this the primary system or is this the secondary system. That way, when if you're using that failover module, it knows which it's telling this system, hey, you're currently the primary server, and the other one is currently the secondary server, so it knows when it should answer depending on which system is active. So if the primary server gets deactivated and the secondary server is active, the secondary is the only one that needs to be answering the phone, because if the primary answers and it's not working because it failed over, well, then you're just not going to have, it's not going to work correctly. So you want whatever the healthy system is to answer the phone. So you'd have one system configured as primary, and you'd have another one configured as secondary, or if you just have the standalone, then you just set it to none. And I'll still come back to these two settings in a second. So we've got our server set up, and it's connected to a SIP.us, and we can make phone calls, albeit that I can't hear the audio because of the networking problem. And that's because I'm using a Google router, which I don't recommend. Don't buy a Google router. Oh, great. Here we go. Let me go back to that. Open the workspace back up. And the last thing I'll show you on the gateway here, let's see if it doesn't cause me another problem, is the Say As tab. And what Say As is, is with text-to-speech engines, you occasionally will get some things that come across as an alarm description that doesn't sound good on a text-to-speech engine. So we've got a few examples that are coded, already coded in. So like DEV is for deviation, but if you put that in a text-to-speech engine, it's just going to say DEV or it'll say dev. And if you want it to say deviation, you put in what you want to detect the text as and how you want to convert it. So if you had hi, your engine might say HI. So you want to say that as hi instead, or MAJDEV would be major deviation. So you can code a bunch of these in here and then put what you want it to translate as, and then you can export this to a CSV file if you save it to your desktop. Um, then you can also import that into, I think I've got it on here. Oh, of course I got it on here, into the announcer application. So if you already use the announcer application, which verbalizes the alarms over the speakers of the computer, you can reuse the configuration you had there. So if you go to announcer here, just probably should have worked on this system a little more. Come on, load it up. Then you can go to say as and you can import those existing strings that you had into the announcer. So you're working from the same string set. All right, so that's it. Okay, so next you want to set up the contacts that you want to notify. So now you're going to jump over to the directory. And this is where you're putting in the people that you want to notify. So I've already got an entry for myself. I can double click that, add a new connection. I now have voice available, so I can choose voice. And I got to put in a few details here. So one is my phone number, and then you've got a few options, and we'll walk through those. So can act. This is whether when it calls this person, are you going to allow them to acknowledge alarms or not? The default is to not allow. You can choose allow, and then you just put, when it reads the alarm out to you, you just push the number 2, and it'll ask you to do that. And you can acknowledge the alarm. If you want them to enter a password, a numeric password, then you can put that in there and put the password in. You can hit the reveal button there to see what the password is. I usually always set it to allow. And then you have schedules. So with Win 911, you have schedules that you set on individuals. So as long as they're working with, as long as it's within that time frame, they'll receive the phone call if they're in a call out list or workflow. Then you've got a few other options like description. If you wanted to give some context to this, like this is Steven's cell phone or something like that, you could put that there. Alarm requests. This is when you call into the system, like I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to reserve an inbound channel, you can set the system to, you can request alarms. And when you request the alarms, you can either say, give me all the alarms, or you can limit what this person can request by the alarm labels in the system. So I could say, oh, they only have access to the building 2 alarms. So when they request all alarms, they only get building 2 alarms. So then there's the authorization code. The authorization code is what, when you call in, you have to authorize yourself. So it knows who you are. So when you call into the system, it could be anybody calling in. It's going to ask you for an ID number. So you put in an ID number, and that way it knows it's this particular entry. You have to always put that in there. And this, again, a caller ID, it's questionable whether it works with VoIP usually. If you wanted to have an additional authentication method of the caller ID matches, then it would have to match what you called the contact name. But, or I'm sorry, the phone number, not the contact name, but the phone number itself. So if you want, but the phone number again can come in different different formats. So maybe it will come through, I'll have a plus on it. Maybe it won't have the 1 on it. So you have to worry about stuff like that. But if you wanted to do that, you can. You can put an additional greeting message. And last thing I'll mention, not the last thing because we got to talk about formats. If you want to override your gateway settings for the audio, so maybe this person, it doesn't like how fast it talks, you can slow the engine down. You can change the volume, you can change the voice. Maybe they speak another language or something and you want it to sound a little bit different, then you can change that there. That's what that setting is for. Then over here, you've got alarm format. These alarm formats are what it's actually going to say to you. I like to choose the short format because it's a little cumbersome to listen to a bunch of alarms through the phone. I mean, it can take a while. So if you get a long format, it will take a lot longer. So I like to choose the short formats. For that reason. The default alarm format's pretty long. The long one is really long, and short alarm is well, short condition is the shortest one, which is great for like factory talk, where it just reads you the alarm message. And if you're curious what those formats look like, you can come over to the format section of 191 and look at them. So scroll down here to, which one did I choose? Short alarm format. That's it in excess in the encoded part, but here's what it actually says. It's got some details, so you can get a preview of what it would be. So it's got, like this case, it's got the alarm description, um, condition description, and whether it's active, is acknowledged, and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to be an expert in these spread and these XSLT sheets here. You can come over to this simple format and make your own. So if I wanted to say my own format, I can choose what I want it to say here. So let's say all I really wanted to say for factory talk is the alarm message. Then I would just put that in there and it would give me an example of what it's going to say. Oh, and then I could do additional stuff like was triggered at, and then I could put in the date time. Let's see. At this particular time, I can choose the time format that I want to use. So it says 9:51 a.m. And then when I choose this format, that's what it's going to use when it calls me. Then I go back to the directory, go back in here and change it to that format that I just made my own format, and then I can save it. And so you can use it there. So now that you've created your contact, you can use it in your notification policy. So I have one that's already here. It's got that email in it. So a notification policy is, it's a call out list or workflow. It's how you know, it's when an alarm gets triggered, you send it to a notification policy, and that's how you determine who you're going to be calling for a particular alarm. So I need to add in this new contact I added. It will put it in the list. Maybe I want it at the top, so I move it to the top. I save it. When I trigger this alarm, it'll call me first, and then it will send a notification to Win91 Mobile, which is a mobile app. So that's how you tell the system that it needs to call you. And then before we jump back, I figure it's better to just show you this new feature in here rather than just talk about it. For a long time, we've had some customers that are using an on-call phone that they pass around at the plant, and they still want to be able to know who is acknowledging alarms at different times, rather than just it always saying the on-call phone acknowledged it. So for that, you'd usually have the same phone. You'll have a phone number for the on-call phone. So you'll add this phone in, put in the phone number, and then you add individual users for it. So it's always going to call the same phone number, but when it calls, I can either put in like Chris's number here, or my number, or Ray's number, and it will know it's them acknowledging the alarm and accessing the system versus it always just saying the on-call phone acted, just for more traceability about who's interacting with the system. So that is a new feature we just added with 2024 R2. I just wanted to, probably be a little easier to show you that here than just talk about it in the spreadsheet. Sorry, the PowerPoint. Let's jump back over to PowerPoint then. And talk about those recent enhancements I was just talking, some of them I was talking about. So the first one is speech recognition. So I said earlier that you have to, when you're interacting with the system, you call it, you have to put an authorization code in, and you have to, if you want to acknowledge an alarm, you have to push the number 2. Well, if you don't want to do that, you can enable speech recognition. It only works for English right now. It'll say your authorization code, you say it out loud, it will recognize who you are, it'll read the alarms out, and then you can say act to acknowledge, it'll acknowledge the alarm, and that's how you'll progress through the phone call. So if you're in the car and you can't interact with your phone, and you want to use speech recognition to hear alarms, you can do that now. It's built into the software. You just have to, I believe it's enabled by default anyway, but it is there for you to use. This is what I was just talking about, that shared phone voice contact. So it's that on-call phone option. You have one phone you're calling, but you want to track who is interacting with the system. This allows you to do that. So you could, the reason we do it this way is because you couldn't have the same phone number entered into the system like 3 times and have different authorization codes. That's not how it was designed, and it wouldn't work that way. So that's why we've done it this way. See, a voice say as I talked about that too. It's this customized. It allows you to customize the text to speech engine so that it will say things the way you want them to say. So I'm not going to spend any more time on that, but that's what that is. And the last thing we'll talk about before letting you guys go is, well, other than the best practices here in a minute, is this new multi-act voice option. If you're familiar with Win911, in the version, our older product we just called it version 7 or Pro for a long time. It had a different way of reading alarms out to you on the phone. So the way Win911 works right now is that it will call you, you put in your code, it will tell you the alarm, and then it will ask you if you want to acknowledge the alarm. So if you have 10 alarms, it's going to do that 10 times. It'll read the alarm, ask if you want to acknowledge it, read the next one, ask if you want to acknowledge it, next one, next one, next one. The way the older software worked is where it will read you all the alarms at one time. So it'll read you all 10 alarms, and then it'll ask you if you want to acknowledge them at the end. And then you just acknowledge them all instead of taking an action for each alarm that came through. So we added an option into the software to be able to turn this on or off. So if you like the old behavior and you want to use it, you can turn that on. If you like the new behavior, then you can just leave it the way it is, and it will keep going on a one-by-one alarm basis. So it's up to you and how you want to use the system. And just, I figure we just throw in a few best practice things if you're ever having to set this up at a customer site. Some things that you would want to try to get ahead, to work with the IT team ahead of time in, is there a voice system there in the first place, and can you get them to create the extension or the endpoint for you? Make sure all the network firewall uh, exceptions are made for you too, like 5060 is a basic SIP port. What are the RTP port ranges? You need to be able to access those systems from wherever the Win911 system is from. And almost every time that someone goes out there to set it up, none of these changes have been made. And so it can take a long time to work with a on-prem VoIP server if it's not set up ahead of time. So it's a great idea to contact them before. And then just for just basic setup of the system, if you can call ahead and get everybody's phone numbers, what you want for call out orders, schedules and stuff, that'll just save you time in general, even if you weren't just using voice. If you're using email or anything else and you wanted to have all that configuration ready, so you're not spending a bunch of time hunting all this information down while you're at the site, that could help too. And that's about it for today. So if there were any questions, I'll take a look. And if not, then I think we'll be done today. So let's see if there's any here. Nope, I don't see any questions. If you guys think of any, please reach out to our sales team, and we'll let them know what your needs are, and we'll be happy to assist you. Again, thanks for joining us this morning, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye.